I went down to Waco and I took some drugs down there to go sell where my friend lived. We were smoking in the car and we got pulled over, and upon searching the car, he found weed, cocaine, a bunch of prescriptions, and a gun. And me and my friend did end up going to jail. During this time, I did start experiencing oppression from evil spirits. I could not sleep. I was having a hard time, and I didn't know how to pray. It was not in a state of peace. Through revelation made by God, I was able to start seeing what was going on in my life. From that moment on, I can see clearly now Jesus leading me out of that. And from that moment, my life did change. My name is Escobar. I grew up going to church with my mom. It was a Christian church. We would go on Sundays. My parents were divorced before I was born. I lived in my mom's house with my older brother, Brandon. My dad would take me to Mass at St. Anne's in Compel, so I would go with him. But I don't feel that I got a lot of insight, just him bringing me deeper into the faith, him describing why we were going to Mass. What we were doing there. I didn't fully understand what I was doing there. No one ever spoke to me or told me that being there was being in relationship with God, and what communion was. No one really explained that to me. Growing up, I was an innocent kid, a very sweet kid. Went to school, had friends. I would hang out with the popular kids. But I did notice that the kids I was hanging out with outside of school, when I went to school, I wasn't a part of their group, the popular group. So I did seek out my own group of friends, and the group of friends that I found and I became a part of were skateboarders. They rode BMX bikes. We would skateboard after school. We would skateboard on the weekends, and after skateboarding, there was an older kid that used to hang out with us, and he would get weed from his older brother, and we would smoke it after we were done skateboarding. I became curious about the exchange of my money and the reception of the drugs. So then that led me to become curious about how to get on the opposite end of that, so that how I could give a small portion, receive money, and still have some left over for myself. I was about 14 or 15 at this point. I'm buying weed, selling weed. I feel like at this point, everybody knows me and I'm part of every group. So that fulfilled that desire to be popular, that desire to hang around the popular kids, because I had everyone's phone number, everyone had my number, everyone was calling me, I was seeing everybody. So at this point, everyone was buying weed. And then I started to get customers that would ask me for things other than weed. And I didn't have that. And in my eyes at this point, I'm seeing money passing by. So then I sought to buy, and I did sell it. And then I did get curious about why they wanted that. So then I started using. During this time, I did get arrested a few times for minor possession of weed. And I did go to court for that. I got probation a couple times. I had to take classes. Didn't see it as anything serious in my eyes, because I would spend a few days in jail. My family would get me out. I'd go to court. I would stay out of jail. So in my eyes, it was nothing serious, nothing I really needed to be alarmed about. But that was a very serious moment. So when I was about 17, I went down to Waco and I took some drugs down there to go sell where my friend lived. We were smoking in the car on the way back, and about halfway back to Dallas, we got pulled over, and upon searching the car, he found weed, cocaine, a bunch of prescriptions, and a gun. Me and my friend did end up going to jail for that. I was in jail. I started to see how serious it was. My mom sent me a Bible. I did start praying. I started reading the Bible. And that's how I spent a majority of my day, was reading the Bible. And I would pray before I went to bed, and I would pray in the morning. I would pray and I'd read the Bible, but I wasn't so much as listening to God's voice as I was just trying to understand what I was reading. I wasn't fully stepping into receiving God and full surrendering myself to God and coming into a relationship with Him. So I was more just expecting to see the answer to my prayer, which was helping me to get out of jail. Everything I was surrounded by outside of jail. There was gangs, there was drugs, all in jail. But I knew that I could not be a part of that, especially what I was asking God for. Like, I would play the role of like being, the good person, being like completely turned away from it. But my heart was never convicted of turning away. My heart was never convicted in how bad I was living. So I was going to court. I did end up receiving 2 7-year sentences for the drugs, including the gun, and that sent me to prison. So I went to prison. My family did hire a parole attorney. My first parole, I received a letter that it had been revoked. So that means that I would have to wait another year before another parole hearing. And then my parole attorney went before the parole board with my family, and they spoke to the parole board. And then I received a letter about a week after that said my parole had been granted. So in that moment, I knew that God has done that. I know that that was God moving. And I did recognize Him at that point, but still my heart was not convicted of His love for me. Just like knowing that my life is called to be in relationship with Him. Got out on parole. I was about 21, and I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. I got a job. I was clean. And then I thought that I wanted to connect with my old friends. So I reached out to some old friends. I started seeing and hanging out with some old friends. And at the job where I worked, I met a girl that I started dating, and that relationship was not good for me. That led me to start using and selling, and that also became a inner part of our relationship, was using together. And being around my old friends just increased that desire to sell. And also being on parole, I had it in my mind, not knowing how I was going to make money or what I was going to do for a living, having those felonies on my record. So I started selling drugs, and my drug use got worse. And the girl I was with, she ended up breaking up with me. And that sent me in a emotional spiral. With that breakup and everything that I was doing with the drug use, it all came together, and I just receded into a deep place in my heart that I just started to feel the weight of it and the seriousness of not so much as what I was doing that was frowned upon in society, but just the weight of how I was living my life and the seriousness of what I was doing. The breakup did help me to start examining my life. And upon examining my life, I did start experiencing oppression from evil spirits. It was a bunch of evil spirits. It was the enemy trying to draw me away from what I think God was trying to draw me into. I went through a good period of time, months, of the enemy trying to convince me of a lot of lies. He was trying to convince me that I was not in reality, what I thought was reality anymore. And through that time, I was in a constant inner battle of trying to hold on to the truths that I did know, and that I was where I was. I was in the world with the people who I loved because he was trying to convince me otherwise. And at this point, I could not sleep. I didn't get any sleep. I was not sleeping. I was having a hard time eating. I didn't know how to pray. And I do remember some experiences when I could feel the oppression lift off through prayer. And so, I would try to pray fervently, and I would try to pray with meaningful words, but, it was more in like a terrified state. It was not in a state of peace. The voices did not go away. Nothing went away. At that point, I had determined that it was not the drugs, but I do remember telling my dad, I told him that what I was experiencing. So he did give me a Sacred Heart pendant that I could wear. I did put it on, and even when I wore that, something was trying to convince me that everything that I was experiencing, especially after having it on, was attached to that. So something was trying to convince me to take off that Sacred Heart pendant. And there was a point in time where I didn't know if I should have it on or off. I would put it on, something would convince me to take it off, I'd take it off. I couldn't understand within myself if I felt better with it on or off. So that became a constant struggle. And I can remember just being in such a state of just like oppression, just so unclean, that when I put it on, I could like feel the uncleanness, and I couldn't tell if it was like more on me or if I had like more space from it, and just like what was around me. It felt like at points in time that the chaos around me would come to a stillness when I took it off, and that it would become like I'd become more aware of it when I had on the Sacred Heart pendant. And so like me thinking, okay, I'm less aware of it when I have it off, that would like convince me to have it off. And I don't understand everything that I was experiencing to the fullest. I don't have all the answers to what I was experiencing, but it's just what, from my point of view. So now, through revelation made by God, I was able to start seeing what was going on in my life. One day after work, I was driving home from work. The world just felt so unreal. Just my perception of the world just felt so unreal that I just knew that led me to the Christian church that day. But I did know that I was worn out and I needed help. So I went to the Christian church that my mom took me to growing up, and I sat down in their worship center. I prayed. They had an event going on, so that's what they told me, and they called the cops. Cops kicked me out, and then I didn't know what to do from that point. I was in Grapevine right outside of Coppell, so I did come to my stepmom's house. Don't know where that thought came from. I hadn't seen my stepmom in a long time, and came here. My stepbrother was here. I just went into a normal interaction with them. They were just asking me how I'm doing. I was trying to act like I was doing fine. I was trying to just talk to them. And then I think they saw in me that I was not okay. So they were just asking me what was going on. I tried to explain to them what was going on. And I think they could sense where I was and just and how much pain and just turmoil I was in. So my stepmom did ask me if she could take me to St. Anne's, and I had previously told her about the experience that I just had at that Christian church. And so she took me to St. Anne's. My stepmom told me that whatever I needed to tell God, to tell him, just to kneel down and pray. So I did kneel down, and I asked Jesus to save me. I told him that if he would save me, that I would give up everything that I was doing. The drugs, the lifestyle, everything. I just needed him to help me get out of whatever it was that I was experiencing. Because I had been trying and I couldn't. And, the screaming didn't stop. But I do remember praying there. And it was in such a peaceful presence. It's just like I was at peace within the chaos. And, I was in his presence. And from that moment, my life did change. And he's been walking me out the other side ever since. From that moment on, I can see clearly now Jesus leading me out of that, leading me out of everything I was experiencing. And he did call me to give up everything that I was doing. And I did, and I have. And I was still experiencing the oppression that I was experiencing, the voices and all of that, but I knew I had a conviction in my heart now. I had the Holy Spirit working within me now, and I was aware of that prayer that I prayed in the chapel that day. I was aware of that relationship with God that I had just stepped into. So every day I had an intentionality in my heart towards him, for him, to live my day for him, and to draw closer to him as he was drawing me closer to him. So things changed. I prayed differently. I stepped into prayer differently. I walked throughout my day differently. It was like I would wake up in the morning and I would look for him. I would look for Jesus. And I would look for where he is and what he's calling me into. And he would speak to me and he would lead me into deeper prayer. He led me into the Catholic Church. He led me to Mass multiple times a week. He led me eventually to adoration. He led me to RCIA. I started getting involved in the church, and he called me to get confirmed in the church. I started asking my parents if I had been baptized in the church, if, like what sacraments I had received in the church, and just going deeper with him as he was leading me. Through this whole time, he has been, from that moment, from that time in prayer at the chapel, removing from within me the things that are not of him. He's been separating the light from the dark. He's been removing the darkness from within me and filling me with his light. So he's just been purifying me. And was a lot of purification that needed to be done. Not all of it's comfortable, but, to step into life with him, to become pure, to become in the likeness of him, it's not going to be comfortable for most of us because, we're in a fallen world. We're not, just like he cleaned the disciples' feet. We get dirty living in this world, but he cleans our feet. He makes us clean. We're cleaned by his blood, renewed in him. But he's been calling me to live in him. I died for him that day when I gave up my life. And he's been showing me the life that he gives me. So I've just been following him every day. I just love him every day, and I allow him to love others through me every day. And I just ask him to help me become more in the likeness of him. I just want others to experience his love as I have, because I've just been receiving it, and now I know a place that I was, and I know there's so many people that need him the way I did and may not see it, because I had no idea how much I needed him. I had no idea I was doing anything wrong. I thought that life was what I was experiencing, which was the absence of life. I was living in such a dark place. I didn't know what light was. And then when I experienced light, when I experienced Jesus, he just started to show me himself, and he is life. So then life started to make sense, and I'm just so captivated by him. Like everything that I do is like an experience of him, because I had no idea what joy was, what peace was, what happiness was, but he is all of it. He's the center of all things. He is the beginning and the end. He is life.